Tonight, the programming is sponsored by the Southern California Women's Caucus for Art, a almost 50-year-old artist organization that has a mission that I think you would fall on good ears with those of our panelists, which is to create community through art, education, and social activism. So we're delighted that Sheila has invited this grouping to join us, and I think we'll just let it get going. So Sheila Pinkel, one of our artists in the exhibition, and when we finish, I will bring up an image so you can everyone can see her work as well as a few slides of the exhibition. So
great. Thank you so much, Suvan and Sandra. It's been a marvelous experience, and you've made it quite a dimensional one. When Suvan and Sandra invited me to create a panel, uppermost in my mind was the importance of building community at this time when the world feels so uncertain. It is a joy and an honor to bring together this group of remarkable people who have the ability to imagine a better world and then work to make it happen. They are courageous, innovative, and caring people who have successfully built organizations that focus on improving the lives of the homeless, the undocumented, the incarcerated, the non-white, and the LGBTQ people living in Los Angeles County. The groups represented here are Justice LA, Kaos Network, Uncommon Good, Los Angeles Poverty Department. I could spend the rest of the time talking about the remarkable accomplishments of these people, but instead I will ask them to speak for themselves. They will include the following in their comments. When was your group started and why? What are the goals of your organization? How have those goals evolved? How has your group intersected with other groups? What are some of the projects or events your group has generated? Describe in detail successes and failures, and how has your group succeeded in building community? That's a big order, and I hope that you can get through some of it in your comments tonight. Each group will have 10 minutes to talk about their work. At 9 minutes, I'll raise my hand, signaling that you have 1 more minute. After this, we will have time for the panelists to ask questions and make comments about the work of the other panelists. The viewing audience is invited to write questions in the chat throughout the presentations, and the panelists will answer them at the end of the discussion. We will begin this evening with people from Justice LA, Ivette Ale and Eunices Hernandez. So we'll start with Ivette and then go to Eunices.
Thank you so much for having us, Sheila. And thank you for being a member of Justice LA. Having such a dynamic coalition of organizations and members has really made JLA's work really successful. So we were founded in 2017 as a response to LA County's $3.5 billion jail expansion plan. And you heard it right, it was with a B, billion. And organizations came together to stop this jail plan from happening, which would expand the largest jail system in the world. So LA County has more people incarcerated in our jails than anywhere else. And the board was about to move forward with expanding that very large system. Families that have had loved ones inside, county jails, families like mine who have been torn apart by the carceral system, by the deportation system, have been demanding a reduction in law enforcement, a reduction in incarceration and criminalization for generations and decades here in LA. And so those organizations like the one that I represent, Dignity and Power Now, have been fighting against the carceral system for many, many years. And Justice LA came together as a coalition specifically centering the leadership of formerly incarcerated people and their families, Black, Indigenous, and Brown folks, LGBTQ folks, folks with varying accessibility needs, and centering those voices in our campaigns. And over the last 3 years, we've had many victories, including stopping that jail expansion plan that we sought out to stop 3 years ago. And now in the next year, the board is moving towards not just stopping jail expansion, but actually closing Men's Central Jail, which is unprecedented. Over the last year, we've also led the development of the Alternatives to Incarceration roadmap at the county. And I would love to actually hand it to my co-conspirator in this work, Eunices Hernandez, to talk more about ATI and some of the other victories that we've had in JLA.
Thank you, Yvette. And thank you so much for having us, and Sheila, for inviting us into this space. Appreciate you all. So the Alternatives to Incarceration report that we helped put together in partnership with the county is called Care First, Jails Last. But, you know, for us, it's like care first, jails never. And so if you look a lot at the recommendations in that report, there's over 114 that are really geared towards keeping our people out of the jails, out of the emergency rooms, and also keeping police away from our people, right? And so a lot of the recommendations are prevention. A lot of them are enhancing the existing services in our communities. Like, there isn't enough, so invest in that. And that's something that we are extremely proud of and call it a success, because nowhere in the county is there a blueprint that like the Care First report. And mostly, again, if you see the recommendations, like, if we could be candid, it is about how do we shrink the probation department? What recommendations can we put in to shrink the DA's power? So that also is like kind of filtered in all the recommendations in that report. We've also been able to work on successful budget advocacy. Recently, we were able to push the county to invest over $70 million into actually implementing the recommendations within the ATI report, which is really exciting. We also managed to push them to move dollars destined for jail construction into capital construction for alternatives to incarceration, like community-based health programs such as mental health or substance use and employment services. All of those things, I mean, even during COVID-19, in the first couple of months, we were able to push the bureaucracy in the system to release over 5,000 people from the LA County jail system, which is as large as some prison system in some states. And that's just a fraction of what we've had. So COVID-19 also has allowed us to get more people out. I mean, it's really problematic what's happening in there. People are dying of COVID-19, but things that people thought were impossible are also happening to get folks out. I pass it back to Yvette.
Yeah, I don't know if you want us to pause here, Sheila, and ask questions, or if you want us to continue full steam ahead.
Well, you got some more time to go if you want to keep going, because you guys have done an amazing job of creating coalitions and creating events like the Roses event in the spring and so on. You might want, and even the ballot initiatives that you're working on right now.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. And someone, Martine, dropped in the chat box a question about how we recommend folks voting on Prop 25. Well, I love this question because Justice LA has been diligently working on pretrial reform for years. And so pretrial reform includes bail reform, but it really focuses on the concept of incarcerating people without a conviction. So we believe that in order to really get to the root of the problem, we have to shrink the system, right? We have to shrink incarceration, shrink police departments, and expand care in our communities. And so when we're thinking about Prop 25, we're excited about the idea of ending money bail. Like, money bail is exploitative. Money bail predominantly impacts Black and Brown people. Money bail is a way to keep poor communities without access to freedom. And so money bail is harmful, and we oppose it. However, what Prop 25 does is actually expand the very system that allowed money bail to become the mechanism for exploitation of our communities to begin with. And so it does it by three things. It expands funding to law enforcement. So it mandates that probation departments or the sheriff's departments, but it has to be a law enforcement agency. It mandates that millions of dollars of funding go to law enforcement to enforce supervision of folks that haven't been convicted. So even if folks are released from jail pre-trial, they can still be under the supervision of law enforcement. So we're talking about electronic monitoring, we're talking about drug testing, we're talking about search and seizure. And so what Prop 25, the first thing that Prop 25 does is expands money for law enforcement. The second piece is it mandates what are called algorithmic-based risk assessment instruments. And what those are crime prediction algorithms. So they take data about a person, like their age, like their prior arrest record, and I'm not even talking about convictions, arrest record, and even their zip code, to create a profile on this individual that spits out a risk score, much like a credit score. And they use that score to determine whether someone's free or someone's incarcerated. These tools have been used in other jurisdictions with estimates of over 90% inaccuracy. And when they're used, they're biased towards Black, brown, young, and poor community members, and actually increases the gap, the economic disparity gap between those that are incarcerated and those that are released. The third part about Proposition 25 is that it gives more power to judges to incarcerate people pre-trial. So it increases what's called judicial discretion. And so judges can ignore the risk score altogether. So even if the risk score says that someone's low risk, they can throw it out and decide to incarcerate. And what we saw in jurisdictions like Kentucky, where they implemented a similar model to SB 10/Prop 25, what we saw is more pretrial incarceration, not less. And remember, we're talking about pretrial incarceration, not just ending money bail. And so for those reasons, and I can go into more depth if folks have any questions on that. For those reasons, Justice LA recommends a no position on Prop 25, and the San Francisco Public Defender has joined us, the LA County Public Defenders Union, the ACLU of Southern California, the NAACP, SE Justice Group, the list goes on. And so community-based grassroots organizations and folks that really understand this policy, we all agree this is not the way to end money bail. This is in fact entrenching and expanding the very system that keeps our folks inside. And so that's our position on Prop 25. But I'll hand it over to Anisis to talk about the work we're doing with Measure J, because I'm sure folks have heard the calls to defund law enforcement. They've been sweeping across the country. But Measure J is what that looks like in action, what it looks like to divest from punitive systems and actually invest in the things that actually keep us safe. So I'll hand it over to Anisis to talk about Measure J.
Great, and I'll be fast because I know I've talked a lot already, but Measure J is a local LA County initiative that's on the ballot in November. It moves 10% of locally generated tax dollars into community investment that looks like supporting Black businesses, Black community-based businesses, small businesses, housing. One of the biggest pieces for me is the youth programming piece and the youth support. It also invests money in the construction of housing and affordable housing and the jobs that actually will build out those construction projects. And also it invests in alternatives to incarceration. Yvette just mentioned pretrial. In LA County, our pretrial population is over 7,000 people. That's larger than a lot of other like state prison populations as well. And so Measure J funds pretrial community-based services so that we can better support folks in our communities pretrial so that they don't end up being incarcerated pretrial. This is not a new tax. This just, when you pay your property taxes here in LA, when you buy something locally here in LA County, all of those LA County tax dollars go into a fund, a bucket of money. It's $8.8 billion right now in LA County. So when we say we want 10% of that money, it's just a drop in the bucket. And it equates about 500 million up to $1 billion is what could potentially be transferred. None of the money that's moved can go to or go through the traditional system of injustice. So the sheriffs can't touch it, probation, prosecutors, the DAs, and none of them can touch that money. It can only go to community-based organizations, the health departments, or county departments that are helping with employment support. When Yvette says that this is defund the police, strategically it is. But if y'all have any questions on Measure J, we can get into that. But again, a ballot on the initiative in November moves up to $1 billion into community, especially the communities that have been most devastated by over-incarceration and what we're seeing now, a lack of investment and deaths of COVID-19.
Yeah, and I just like to wrap up this piece by saying, you know, within Justice LA, we're not just imagining and fighting against what we don't want to see. We're actively building what we do want to see. And so that's where Measure J comes in. Because in these moments like COVID-19, the things that actually keep us safe are housing, access to medical care, you know, our basic needs are what keep us safe. And when those are the first things that are cut during a recession, during a moment of crisis, it makes all of us, not just the most marginalized among us, but all of us less safe. And in order to maintain a certain level of funding for those basic needs, we need to pass policies like Measure J to ensure that those basic needs are protected. The county will still have 90% of the rest of net county revenues to do with it as they wish. We hope they continue investing in alternatives to incarceration and housing, but that's just 10% of local dollars. That's not even counting state dollars, federal dollars that come into the county. So we're asking for a very small percent of a very large budget to ensure care for our communities. We want more, but this is a great first step.
Right. Thank you both so much. That was terrific. So we're going to now talk with Ben Caldwell and Mel Hunter from Kaos Network, and we'll start with Ben.
Hey, how you guys doing? It was really phenomenal to hear about Just Justice, because that's a very, very powerful sounding program, and you're in the streets doing the right things. Those are good stuff I was hearing. We started in a similar way, but not with the focus of justice in the sense of the prison or jail system, but I wanted to work with the 11 to 25-year-olds in our neighborhood and set up an incubator that was media-based as a way to kind of see how we as media people could best help the community, and especially the nonprofit communities and general outliner communities within South Central. I first started with that as a focus, and through Watts Towers. So my relationships was with Watts Towers and Embed Gallery when I first started. And that's when I met Sheila, actually. It was during those times, with actually a little bit sooner. But the other portion that, as we moved on, I dealt with all the schools in the area and started offering up art, using my place as a neutral space for them to gather. And as gang started being started by the powers that be in our neighborhoods, we offered a neutral space for the youth to gather, and that movement was called iFresh. And out of that group of iFresh, we were able to launch musicians like, who's really famous now, like my brother Label Makara, who did Lion King, the folks from young ladies like Yo-Yo, who rapped with the hip hop organizations, the brothers Johnson, who were a part of that. So all of them would come to our communities and help the kids professionalize their lives and work with the marginal artists who were avant-garde type artists to have a space to be somebody in our neighborhood. And then that was seen by by Cal Arts, and also my collective work with people throughout the time of my working has really been toward collaborations with everybody, because that was the only way that I could see that we could go at this. And I also did it with the understanding of the Native culture and all Native cultures, but the 4 directions, that we needed the whole family to be in our decision making that we did. So I always had that as a basic foundation for all of the work that we did. I worked with Electronic Cafe, where we connected 5 district communities during the Olympics, which is what we're doing now. We did this in '84 as a way to deal with a Marcata in East LA and 8th Street, a Korean restaurant, and then and then a gumbo house right behind me in South Central LA, and a Jewish coffee shop in Venice, and our hub was the Mocha. CalArts saw a lot of the works that we did, and so I went and taught at CalArts for 15 years, and my whole idea there was to work with all the disparate art organizations. My first 5 were Plaza de la Raza, and and Watts Towers, and Inner City Arts, and CalArts, and My Place were 5 places that we interconnected with. And then we grew it out to 10, where we had self-help graphics, visual communications, the Armory, and Boys and Girls Club in Santa Clarita. And then after we did that, I came back to Los Angeles and started working. My business has always been working, and I helped to start a group called Project Blowed. And Project Blowed, we were able to launch the careers of a lot of musicians like Jurassic 5, Ava DuVernay, Freestyle Fellowship, and all of them were teams still up to now. And up to now, we 11 years ago, we started an art walk as a focus of collectively using art as a fusion methodology for Leimert Park. And then with that, I got to meet this lovely young lady, Mel, who was one of the the last parts of these 10, I guess 8 years of us working. And I thought I would have her in the mix because with her team comes a whole lot of the new way to look at things, because she has a young lady that works with her team, the crock pot and the juice joint. And so I'm gonna have her talk about that. And then out of that grew a group called We Love Leimert, which is a collective of about 150 millennials that we're using as a way to go at all the various gentrifying feelings that Leimert Park is having right now. So Mel?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ben. So with being an incubator, I was asking people, this was in July of 2014, I was trying to find a space to do a music event, and I started curating music events in Los Angeles because I'm from Alabama, but my first year here was very hard for me, and I'm a very communal, the Southern culture is very communal, you know, and I understood the power of community, and I understood the necessity of community, especially for people of color. So I just needed to figure out what would be the easiest way for me to build community. And I knew that music was the most universal tool, and music was the way to do it. So when I asked about where can I go to I was trying to bridge the gap between my age group, our elders, and even younger kids through music, through entertainment, through art, through creativity. And I was introduced to being at Kaos Network. And from the first Crockpot Festival there, which was a big deal and still one of my favorite moments, even 6-7 years later, I just wanted to continue building in the community, and Ben has been able to help groom me in the platforms that I'm curating and creating, because the Crockpot was like a monthly festival, but then we kind of had a spin-off called the Juice Joint that became like a bi-weekly and then eventually a weekly open mic and jam session. And that was the space that really became like church. That's the thing where I'm like, oh my God, my dreams really did come true, because we've been sustaining it for 7 years, and it's so communal, and it's people from, I've never seen anything like it, honestly, because it's the type of environment that just breeds love and community, and just this grace and understanding with each other. And it's bringing together every age from like 8 to 80. It's bringing together every ethnicity. It's bringing together different religions. It's bringing together different genders, sexual orientations, like in Los Angeles, where everybody has their own little separate pocket, and there is nowhere for us to come together and it actually be a safe space. We created that. And I say we because I really didn't have anywhere else to do it. And Ben just opened his space. Like he said, he's like an incubator. He believes in the energy, I think, of what he saw. And he saw that like we were peaceful. It was all love. It just was, it would be times where it would be like literally a 2-year-old, every age in between, and the oldest person in the room, 98. but all of those people, we were able to bridge that gap and bring everybody together and have this strong sense of community through music and art. And I just want to continue to expand on that, because it's hard to be at arms when like that drum beat and that music is just undeniable. That's the way as spirits we all connect to each other, even if we don't understand the same language, you know. And we've been building that out, and I think trying to expand that's our goal, to keep expanding on this, because the community is strong. Everybody eats, everybody benefits. People are working on each albums with each other. People are like getting opportunities from their careers, from the platforms that we created and cultivated, you know. So we've created a platform that's helping creators of color.
And in a lot of ways, what that means is we're helping a lot of the psychosocial trauma that just living here has caused.
Yes.
And then also taking care of these young men and women after they come out of these holding cells that they have our people in. So what we are trying to do is we find that that's the only way that we've been able to live in America. And you call our world the blues when it was called the reals. It was called reality. It wasn't called the blues. It was a voyeur's view toward us. We looked very sad sometimes when we were talking about all the shit that this country had put on us. But we knew how to put it to music, and we knew how to change that vibration into a change that really worked for us. So in this incubator, we even found that music is a strong panacea, and it links us to the ancientness of our base culture in us. And so one of the things that we're starting to do now is we're angry, we're mad, but we're wanting to also exude love through all of that. And so the way that we're trying to start exuding love is by talking. We have a lot of toxic, unhealthy things going on around us. So what can we do about finding healthy words? We have toxic words. So is there a way that we could start talking about healthy words within all these toxic places, where we can engender another way to look at all of this that is also going to get us ready for this, I feel, spiritual change that we're going through now. It's interesting to see the people who are really negative. In a lot of ways, they're showing it so well that I think I like that it's happening, because you can see their vibratory, you can almost see it in their aura, how that vibration is changing toward positivity. Because when you're being that negative, it's just like you're out of focus, and it looks that way even in media to me. If you really, really see what's going on, they really look ill. And so this transition is taking place right now, and it's making them all very ill, because but I don't want us all to die like the ones in jail. We're finding that that living close, but you know, as a group of people, we've done this a lot. Is there anything you want to wrap up with now?
One of my main pillars, and one of the reasons why I have always been led to Lamarck Park, or either your mentorship is to try to figure out how to build community and sustain it. You know, because my goal wasn't to just try to throw a music event just to have fun. We need a safe space. Like we need a place where we can grow, where we won't be judged, where we can, like I keep saying, just have a little more grace with each other, where we won't take advantage of each other, where we can kind of reteach or reintroduce the whole even idea of being communal. And I'm trying to pick that up and learn that, because everything has just shifted to everybody kind of being for self or for themselves and their immediate family, and kind of not worried about the collective. But if we all figure out a way, the only way out of this is to do it as a collective, you know, the only way to take our power back. So just in whatever ways we can continue to build and expand upon building community and sustaining it, because we have conflict. As humans, as people, not everybody's at the same level of understanding and life and concept of community. People come to LA to chase their dreams and career. They might not have necessarily moved to LA to build community. you know, so just trying to reintroduce that into our minds too, because we're up against a lot out here.
And I think that that's what's made us succeed, is plain and simply that, is that we've been able to collectively work together and get this done and set up a vision for the future by operating in the future. So I could enumerate some of those, but I think I'll pass it on to the next person.
Great, thank you. I wish we had many hours for each of you to speak because you have lots to say, but we do have a time constraint here. So the next group that we're going to speak with is Uncommon Good, and that was started by Nancy Mintie, and also Carolina Vallejo will be speaking with Nancy. So you're on. Thank you. Thank you both, that was just great.
Thank you.
Okay, am I on, Sheila?
You're on. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here and so inspired by what I've heard so far. Our organization is called Uncommon Good, and it grew out of my work at the first organization that I founded, which was the Inner City Law Center in Skid Row. And that's a legal aid and social service center for people who are homeless and tenants living in slum housing. And the reason I bring that up is because that's where I first met John Malpede, the artist founder of the Los Angeles Poverty Department, or LAPD as they call themselves, who you'll be hearing from later this evening. And that's a theater organization for homeless people. And you'll be hearing from the wonderful Henriette and Stephanie of that organization. And their founder, John, became our artist in residence at the Inner City Law Center way back in 1984 when the Olympics came to Los Angeles, and he was doing art around how the Olympics were causing systemic oppression of the homeless people at that time. And if you haven't seen the LAPD theater productions, I just so highly recommend it. It's the most powerful theater I have ever seen in my life. And they just do brilliant work. But anyway, after 20 years at the Law Center, I wanted to do some homeless prevention work. You know, once someone has become homeless, they've suffered so much. There's so much suffering involved. And I thought if we could work with kids who were at the next, you know, at the most risk of becoming the next generation of people suffering from poverty and even homelessness, then we could prevent a lot of that personal and societal suffering, you know, that is homelessness. And I also saw that young people coming out of the law schools and the medical schools weren't able to do what I had done, which is go back into communities of need and serve, because the cost of their education had risen so high that they couldn't afford to do that. They had to go work for the man, you know, to pay off their school loans. So these were some of the motivations that caused me to start Uncommon Good. And here we work with the very lowest income families and youth, and those are the relatively recently arrived immigrant families. And we help them break that intergenerational cycle of poverty by succeeding in school and going on to college. And we also have an educational loan repayment program for young doctors that want to go back into their communities of high need to serve. And then when the recession of 2008 hit, the suffering of our families increased even more. And so we brainstormed with them about what more we could do. And out of that brainstorming came our urban farming program, where we hire the parents of the young people in our education program to grow locally organic food. And then that food becomes available to the families in our program who otherwise couldn't afford, you know, fresh organic produce. And right around that same time, we had been working out of a free space in an old convent at a church, and we'd outgrown the space, and the church wanted to use the building for something else. And so we built a first of its kind in the world green building by hand with the children and the parents and the grandparents in our program. And people have now come from all over the world to see it. And we partnered with our local Native American tribe in that effort because we were building on land that was their ancestral land. And so we wanted to do it in a way that would honor them. And we were incredibly honored to have tonight's moderator and artist, Sheila Pinkel, who is known all over the world for her art and her social justice work, do the artwork in our building that tells the story and the history of the Tongva people. It was an incredible gift that you gave us, Sheila. I'll just be forever grateful. And then when COVID hit this year, we did some more things. We started an emergency fund for the families that were losing their jobs and didn't qualify for unemployment because they'd worked in the cash economy or because of their immigration status. And we expanded our farm into a regional food bank program. And now we're seeing, mental health needs in the community spike. They were already high before COVID, and now they're just off the charts. And we don't have any effective mental health services in our area. So I contacted an innovative global mental health pilot project, which is bringing mental health services to the poorest people on the planet. They're working now in India and Gaza, Mexico, and parts of Europe. And we've created a very distinguished international team of experts, and I'm trying to raise the money to bring that project here to our community, and it would be the first site of that project in the United States. So we're very, very excited about that. But now I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Carolina Vallejo, and have you hear about her really brilliant work that she's been doing with the youth and the families in our program.
Thank you, Nancy. Pleasure to meet everyone. Like Nancy mentioned, our efforts at Uncommon Good, both in wellness and health and also educational equity, really focuses on working with the entire family, not just individuals. We know, right, and we realize that our students and their families, especially in our education efforts, right, their lived experiences really, really matter. Both their past and their present informs their goals and dreams. And a great majority of our efforts in our education department at Uncommon Good really focuses on college access programming. But, we realize, really that it's really important to think about that in relationship to other needs that our families have. And so often a lot of the programming that I'll share with you all today really works together and in tandem to make sure that we think about overall wellness, not just thinking about educational equity in our community. So our college access work mainly focuses on working with students that are in 4th grade all the way to 12th grade and supporting them in their journey to college. And a lot of our programming surrounding that works with parents and students in developing college knowledge workshops, field trips, more limited now due to COVID, but a lot of support in helping our families navigate the US educational system. I, like many of our families, are immigrants to this country and also first in our families often to graduate from high school and go to college. So it's really imperative to think about the ways in which we can help our families navigate often institutions that may be hostile or may not be welcoming for our families. A lot of the support related to our educational efforts also includes building a support network for our students and their families. And so specifically for our students, we match them with mentors and tutors that can provide academic support, especially if their local school districts are not providing adequate support. But as Nancy mentioned, right, it's really important to think about overall wellness for all of our families, especially in thinking about trauma and thinking about the ways in which our families are affected by structural oppression. And so a lot of additional programming that we provide in our education department, both for our parents and for our students, works with thinking about mental health services and education, thinking about health and nutrition, thinking about activities and support group for our young men and women of color, right? And also thinking about how other issues related to the environment and environmental justice works together in thinking about our future, right? And so we definitely, one of our founding programs in our education department is our Team Green program, which helped fund and build our Whole Earth building. So, one of its kind in the world. Some additional programs that we have in addition to that is really supporting the arts and supporting our students' passions. So that includes music mentoring, developing our students' love of reading and writing, but also through our work with our programs in supporting medical professionals in our loan repayment program, but also in thinking about our educational efforts. We often think about the ways in which we can support our young people in becoming doctors and going into the medical field themselves. And so we definitely have a medical pipeline program that helps support our students in that area as well. So I'm happy to share many other of our experiences, but if Nancy, you would like to add on as to any other work that Uncommon Good has done so far. Throw it back to you.
You know, maybe I would just add one other thing, and that is that you know, there were many seismic events, you know, this year, but the two biggest were COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement exploding onto the national scene, and changing hearts and minds in a matter of weeks in this change that in the past would have taken a generation, you know, to accomplish. And I was really, really proud of my staff and client community, because as Carolina mentioned, you know, she and everyone else on the staff except for myself and the development director also come from low-income immigrant family backgrounds. And they came together and created programming around racism, and specifically even racism in the Latinx community, and some of the misconceptions that were being fanned and fueled by the Spanish language media that were so harmful. And so Carolina and the others created programming both for the youth and for our parents, so that they could explore these questions, these hard, difficult questions, and have honest conversations and learn from each other. And so I was so moved and so proud of them. And they're, you know, I learn from them every day, and I just feel so blessed to have colleagues like Carolina and the others on our staff that are transforming our world, really.
Right, thank you both so much. As with all the other speakers, I have a million questions, but we'll have to move on right this second. So the last group that we're going to be hearing from is LAPD, Los Angeles Poverty Department, with Henriette Brower and Stephanie Bell. So Henriette, why don't you start?
Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. Wow, here we are all together on the Zoom. Yeah. So yeah, wow. I'm glad, Nancy, that you did the introduction, because I have to talk about John, who is sitting right there around the corner. And yeah, and you know him better from that time when LAPD started in 1984. When John came to LA because of the Olympics that were there. Yeah, so that was the time when the Los Angeles Catholic Worker and Inner City Law Center started in a trailer right there in Skid Row. And Nancy, John got a job at Inner City Law as a paralegal, you know, to write down the testimonies of people and hanging out in the DPSS office, as he says, and getting to know a lot of people. And that's where also the theater workshop started. When the lawyers went home, they pushed the desks to the side, and all the people that he met in the DPSS office and on the streets that had built already relationships with each other, they met, and they started making theater, improvising, talking about what was going on. And that's really how LAPD started. And yeah, just maybe for younger people, this was also when homelessness started. Before 1984, there were homeless people, but around that time is when, it really exploded as something that was very visible, and people started sleeping in the streets, and there were a lot of changes that caused these things to happen. People to lose, mental health care, people to lose housing. And also a lot of affordable housing started getting defunded, and so this is when a lot of people came to Skid Row, because in Skid Row there were a whole bunch of hotels where you could get a single room occupancy hotel, where people that had very little money could stay. And those hotels were there because there used to be the train station, and that's why the hotels were built there. So more and more people started, also coming to Skid Row, but also people started organizing when all these problems started. And so you had Inner City Law Center, you had the Catholic Worker, you had LAPD, LAMP started around that time. It was finding housing for people with mental disabilities. And what was really important, what happened, and that actually happened already before that in the 70s, in around 76, 73, the Catholic Worker there was a plan to sort of level out Skid Row, because Bunker Hill was built, all the big high rises and the business center, and they wanted to expand that to Skid Row because it was declared a blighted area and everything was going to be knocked down. And the Catholic Worker came with a plan that basically said, if you knock all the housing down, all these hotels that are here, you're going to lose affordable housing because it's never going to be rebuilt. And at that time, that's the plan that won. And this is how the hotels were saved. And we had, the Community Redevelopment Agency that actually started funding to clean up for the SRO hotels. And this is really when the boundaries of Skid Row became official. And that created this whole community of people that they basically put there. It's also called the containment plan, because the plan also said, if you don't do this, if you don't save this housing, guess what? Where people are going to go, because this homeless problem is not going to go away in a few years. They're going to go to your neighborhood. So that's why, this plan actually got a lot of traction, because people wanted to keep the people where they were. So that's a little bit a background of Skid Row, and also how that neighborhood, it's one of the few Skid Rows in America that still exists. And it exists because there is so much grassroots organizing in that community. And that's also, that's how we have worked. LAPD has always worked with other groups, like the Catholic Worker and the City Law started with. And then for 30 years, we didn't have a space. We worked wherever anybody would give us space, and in the streets. And that's where we met and rehearsed. And since now 5 years, we have finally a space. It's called the Skid Row History Museum and Archive, where because we've been around for a long time, that's 35 years, and so we have all the projects we do. We make theater, but it's really, the goal was always from the very beginning to create community on Skid Row and to get the real deal out to Normalville, because there's a lot of stories about homeless people, but it's very few people that listen to the people that are actually experiencing this and make the connection to the social forces that are causing people to be homeless, and the traumas that people have gone through. And so it was really about giving a voice to the people and telling it like it is. And we're still doing that. But since we have a space now, we have more opportunity to, because there's nothing in Skid Row. There are no spaces where you can be creative. There are no spaces where you can just hang out and be together, except for the two little parks, that we have, the Gladys Park and St. Julian Park. And now we have a space where we can also, besides make rehearsals and having community meetings, we offer it to the communities. If people want to organize something for themselves, they can have the space. We also now do exhibitions because we have this big space. So we have exhibitions of community members, but also exhibitions the last, well, since 2007, we really have focused on gentrification because now there is a community and the community is under great pressure to be displaced and disappeared because gentrification is moving in. It's a very desirable real estate, Skid Row. And so that is really our focus that has been the last years and there's a new plan, a plan for downtown. The city of Los Angeles is rezoning and recoding, updating all their community plans. And the first plan is going to happen in Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. And the plans were, when we first read them, to just create market rate housing and make very tall buildings, let it all go. Should I stop? I see you wave. Yeah, so that's the focus. But I really wanted to give the time to Stephanie, because Stephanie, I really wanted her to ask a few questions and just say something about the community. Stephanie, we talked about when you came to LAPD in 1996. The first performance you were doing was about Agent Orange, right? It was about war veterans. And the last performance was a very big one about gentrification. So, what fuels development? Maybe you want to say something about that.
Yeah. Well, I've been with LAPD ever since January of 1996. I was introduced by a young lady who's no longer with us, and she saw me singing at a performance in Gladys Park, and she asked me to come to the LAPD, and I was like, the police department? She's like, no, it's called the Los Angeles Property Department. I was like, oh, really? I didn't think, I knew about theater down there, but I didn't know that there was one going on like that. So I was introduced to John and the old crew that used to be with us. And our first play we did was called Still at War. And it was about the veterans and the Agent Orange and how they would come, go to war and they would come back shell-shocked. And a lot of them ended up downtown in the community, because I was down there ever since 1990 before I met John. And I saw a lot of military women and men. And some were, there was one particular guy, he was dressed military still on San Pedro Street. And he would talk and he would salute you and everything. So when we did that play, it was like, wow, this is really going on. And we had the theater and stuff. And so, we got a lot of people that were involved to come to watch the play and to identify what was going on with them themselves, and we did have one particular guy, he was a part of the play, but we had to put him out because he was just going on and on and on. And, we was getting very, upset but the play was beautiful. It was called Still at War, and the guy was Otis, who played the military guy, and I was his girlfriend that he hadn't seen in years, and I decided to reappear because he was giving me money so I could take care of being pregnant, but I got rid of the kid. So I'm back at his house again, and trying to get more money out of him. And then he didn't know who I was. Um, it was so touching to be a part of that. So we got a lot of people that could identify and understand what it was about, that they were going through also. And I talked to a lot of veterans when I used to live down there and stuff. So it's so many plays I've done, and we did what was that? Fury Development. What we
What
did
fu-
in Pasadena. Huh?
what fuels
Yes.
development? Remember?
Yes.
Did at the
Yes.
Armory.
That was the Armor in Pasadena. That was a very touching play that we did also. It was, man, my memory is not as good as it used to be, but I remember a lot of things that we did that was so interesting, and got a lot of people involved in. And we went to different hotels, and we used to do pieces of our plays, like 3 different hotels a night, and people didn't know that we were part of the play, that they thought that we were audience people. But then when we started speaking, they was like, oh, you're part of LAPD? And they're like, yeah. It's like, wow, how do you get into this? I'm like, just show up at 7 o'clock at such and such a place. And, if you're interested, I said, it gives you a lot of focus and a lot of communicating with people that that's out of communicating, because we don't know how many people downtown was going through a lot of people I was talking to down there, they were going through a lot of stuff at the particular time. So I would invite them to come to the Los Angeles Property Department so they can, see what we were made of and what we could give back to the community, and what would they love to accept to deal with themselves as well as living in the community. But it was a lot of fun, and I'm still there, so and I'm gonna keep on being there until the time. So thank you guys for letting me be on the panel. And excuse me, I have to go to the little girls' room.
Thank you both so much.
Watching me.
Come back, Stephanie.
So now, I'm hoping that we can all get together and for a little chat. And I have 1 or 2 questions, and I'm hoping that we can all address them. And then maybe you have questions or comments for each other. My overriding question, since this is about building community, is to what extent has social media been important in facilitating your building community? To what extent is face-to-face encounters important in building community? And I thought maybe each one of you could speak to that, not for a whole long time, but I wish we had a long time, but if you could talk about whether social media has helped you grow your community or interfered with it, or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, for LAPD, it's all talking to each other. There's hardly any social media. We walk the streets. We make old-fashioned printed flyers and hand them out. And it's really what Stephanie says. People know each other in the community. John, can you turn off the thing? I hear echo. And it's really, it's sharing on Facebook, and a lot of people in Skid Row are on Facebook, and that's where we announce things too. But it's really about personal contact for us. Yeah. And the weird thing is now with COVID, it's a miracle really that Stephanie is on the Zoom, because there's no internet in Skid Row. And people wanted to stay together. You know, everybody was locked up in their tent or in their apartment, you know, the one room that they have. And then they were hanging out with their phone in front of the Starbucks trying to get connected to other people. And so we did a whole campaign to get hotspots and to people and cell phones and tablets and install Zoom on it and teach people how to use it. And we've been rehearsing on Zoom for the last half year. That's how we have stayed together. There she is. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Somebody else.
Yeah, social media has been a big part of our organizing. We have a really strong following of over 45,000 people on Instagram, which means that our actions, our analysis get shared and reshared out very quickly. We utilize platforms like the Instagram Live, like Twitter Storms, to activate thousands of people into taking action. We can get well over 10,000 public comments to the Board of Supervisors for a meeting. And all of that makes a difference. It's why we've been able to get motions passed through the Board of Supervisors just this past week to move $28 million out of the Sheriff's Department and away from parks, the current law enforcement presence in parks, and put it into alternatives to public safety in parks. But that's just one example of what we've been able to do just by mobilizing thousands of community members that believe that there's a better way than punitive systems, but giving them the tools to do it, giving them the analysis to be able to participate is really important, and social media facilitates that.
So Yvette, could I just ask you two questions? One is, this week you had a little Twitter storm. So I hear that you were top in Twitter storms this week, number one.
Yeah, we were number one in California, number one in all the largest counties, so San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles. So our Twitter storms that we utilize in conjunction with our virtual action network. So every week, 3 times a week, we have folks take virtual action. So we have a team of folks that comes on Zoom, and they text our network of folks with an action they can take for the day. And so for last Friday, it was participating in our Twitter storm, and that's how we became number one in California. And I think it's also a testament to coalition building and the importance of working in coalitions, because one single organization may or may not be able to achieve that, but because we have so many organizations that are part of this work, working together, coordinating together, that's how we're able to make change. So any tool, including social media, that can help bring folks together, activate folks en masse, and be able to push out the message of restoring our communities, investing in our communities. That's how we're able to make significant changes here in LA County.
And could I just ask Eunices, Eunices, I'm not sure, hi, you know, there was this remarkable roses project in the spring. Could you just briefly describe the synthesis of social media with in-person that accomplished?
Sure, yes, thank you, Sheila. And so the event that she was talking about is the Rose Out of the Concrete, which was actually Yvette's idea. And it was created because a lot of the events, especially the protests, the folks who have compromised immune systems couldn't attend. Like myself, for example, like we're not able to attend these protests. And so this event really was curated for folks to be able to share space with others in a safe and socially distanced way. And the Rose Out of the Concrete event was a call out on social media for folks from the community to drop off flowers and roses in front of the Sheriff's Department office in downtown LA. And each of the flowers represents, for us, folks who are currently incarcerated, people that have died inside the jails, at the hands of law enforcement, state-sanctioned violence, folks who are houseless. So we were able to generate thousands of roses being dropped off and thousands of flowers being dropped off. And I think it was just an event. I'll leave it to you also to add anything, but it was one of those moments where really recharged like a lot of our batteries. You know, this movement and a lot of the movements that y'all are a part of are fueled by the connections of community, of our people together. And that was one of those moments where more people were allowed to share space, where it was safe, but also social media really helped us get a huge turnout for the event. We thought we were gonna get like a few dozen, and we ended up getting thousands and thousands of roses. So it was a beautiful moment.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was tens of thousands of roses. And we actually partnered with a Black queer local florist to provide those roses. And so we were able to generate income from one of our community members who had been out of work because of COVID for months, who generates most of our income from weddings and events. And so we were able to both support community members and also inspired a lot of art. The Rose from Concrete motif came from Tupac's, prolific poem. And so our own Sheila Pinkel also designed a beautiful banner, and artists just brought art, and it became a living, breathing memorial to all of those that we've lost to sheriff violence, to incarceration, to law enforcement violence in our communities. And so there were beautiful altar spaces all around that street. And there was music, there was drumming, there were speakers, folks that have lost loved ones to incarceration, and it was all socially distanced, and folks were able to even just drive by and drop off the roses. So even if folks didn't even feel comfortable getting out, they were able to just like drive through and drop off their roses. So it was a really beautiful event, and the altar stayed there for weeks. So the flowers just dried up on the street, and the altar stayed there for a while. So it was really great to see something that felt generative and cathartic for a lot of folks that have wanted to be on the streets, but because of health reasons, because of other types of commitments, couldn't.
Great. Thank you. That's where the poetic and the political intersected, actually, in a beautiful way. So other people who want to talk about either the way social media or other kinds of, how do you create community? How do people who haven't spoken, how do you do it? I mean, what's important to you in creating community?
Well, here's Ben. One of the things that I've been working with it, like I said, since '84, but part of the way of working with it has always been humane. With Kit and Sherry, the thing that they were really about, and they were really my teachers with this, is to always deal with having both things together, not just 100% virtual. So what we were doing during this break is developing that virtual and learning how to do it and keep it going, so when we become physical, we'll be able to make them both grow together. So we kept our art walks going, because we've been doing it up for 11 years. So we kept the art walk going, but we did it virtually. And then we were able to really expand it in a way that really surprised me, because we could do international. So we were able to hook up with people that we visited and brought back to the United States, and vice versa. We went to like Brazil, and so we did a workshop with the favelas in Brazil and the people who did dancing and people who got to meet them in that area. We did that with Nigerians. We brought Nigerians back and forth, and then we connected with them virtually. Zambia and South Africa, we did the same. And then all throughout the United States, we held mass building workshops, and the mass building workshops were dealing with the idea of drilling down to spiritual ways within every culture and the expressions of mass making. And so we did that for about 3-4 months, so we could spread it out. We were able to build it out. Instead of it just being regional within our own community, we made it, there were whole families that would meet with us and go every Saturday to meet with the various folks that did the mass building workshops. And so those were really pretty phenomenal. And within my building, we started working with the future of what's going to happen on the last mile of being picked up and moved throughout the community. So we're doing a project called Sankofa City, which deals with the whole idea of of beating and meeting through the lens of technology, to have that be a proactive force for the future by offering up things that are imbued with the community focus and tools that they've created themselves to deal with the future. And that way, when future meets it, we've already done a lot of work, and we can tell the state what our needs and desires are. We can build up our own cultural algorithms, and we can meet all the different aspects of what the future brings, but not be fearful of it, but to use it so it can open it up and make it open source for the problems that they're having downtown. We could have that open for everybody to be for the common good. So if we make something that happens within this district that could set up a template on how to engage 5G when it meets our community, and to make it something as funky as the Funkadelics is what we're trying to do. Mel, did you want to say?
We've been relying on social media to kind of stay connected, because like I said, the events and everything that I was curating to kind of establish community and foster that sense were live music events, which we haven't been able to do since the time. I am now promoting one on Tuesdays, which takes place outside. It's more like a drive-in concert, so to speak. You can get out, wear your mask, but just shifting it from being inside of a venue. But the way I've been able to get the word out and kind of maintain my crowd and audience and still keep that sense of community has been via Facebook and Instagram. I don't utilize Twitter as much as I should, but that's been the way to stay connected. And that's the one thing that I feel like everybody has. Corona shut down everything except social media. You know, so even in just figuring out how to pivot and shift and what to do next, taking things virtually, tapping into social media more are some things that I feel like we're gonna have to do. It's like the new normal. It was already a thing, but now it's like really a thing.
And an example of that was just charity. We worked with with that organization with Black Lives Matter, and the phone booth that we hacked, which we could talk doubly about the system of the phones being used in public systems as a way to drain the money from the people who are in jail. And then with those same phone booths, we then hacked it so you could press 1 and hear their story about why they're on death row. And you press 2 and it tells you what to do about it. And press 3 and you can find out other family members that tells you a more engaged story about this person that's locked up forever behind bars. And it was the most opening process that I saw, because you don't even hear that when you listen to because my wife was a lawyer and as a public defender, and the whole idea of hearing a whole person's view, you don't ever hear that when you guys are making a presentation before the court. It's hardly the person speaking for themselves. And it was just a powerful thing listening to them describe how at 18-year-olds, yeah, I made a mistake. I was in a car with a guy who I didn't know. I was just trying to get along in the jungle, and I was in the car and it happened to be a felon, and I didn't know he had all of this whole line. And now as an 18-year-old, now I'm in prison for the rest of my life from 18 until I don't know whatever, So those types of things really, I see technology kind of being twisted that way. How can we also tell double stories? Because it was a story about how the phone booth gets used against us, but then we use that same phone booth to tell the story about the predicament that our people were in. And so those are the kinds of things that I try to see. How can we use the technology in ways that it empowers and opens up other conversations? Because like Harriet was saying, when you're in the homeless district, you don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have those kinds of cultural interconnections. And so you can't join in this whole idea of doing it. So Francois is a part of our team that I work with at USC. He set up water systems so people could bathe and wash their hands. So he was able to do that. And he set up a bike run a system where it could tie in on being recharged. And then you could also have Wi-Fi outlets through a bicycle system. So there are ways that we could start hacking and dealing with, even though they have these as problems, we can, as humans, figure out a way around it with technology. I guess that's basically what I've started seeing, is we can go into the problem, and then as tech geeks, we can show you how to better use it for the betterment of all humanity instead of just a few.
Great. Thank you so much. Is there somebody else? We just have a couple more minutes for this segment. Somebody else want to make a comment? Yes. Henriette. Oh, you're
muted. Yes, I just put it in the chat because I didn't think about it because you said social media, but we created a whole website. It's called Walk the Talk. It's a project that we do. We make a parade through Skid Row every 2 years, honoring people in the neighborhood, and we're telling their stories. We're performing them, but the performances are based on interviews that we do with everybody. And there's about 70 people that we have interviewed over the past 10 years that we've been doing it. And we just created a website also because it's COVID and we couldn't do the parade this year. But that really is like what Ben is saying. It tells the whole story of, you know, the people. It's like an hour, 2 hour interviews of people, and the whole community is invited to come and ask questions, you know, and then we make performances out of that. But if you want to know about the history of the neighborhood, it's told by the people who actually live there. It's really powerful. You want to hear it.
That's marvelous. Nancy and Carolina, do you have any comments about this before we go to our next section?
Well, sure. You know, the heart of our work with youth has always been one-on-one mentoring, which is, you know, harnessing really the power of relationship, that transformative power of relationship, which is really just a fancy way of saying love, right? You know, I've always said that, you know, like in real estate, they say the 3 rules in real estate are location, location, location. Well, the 3 rules of our work are community, community, community. You know, everything is about hands-on community. All our programs arise from the community to serve the community. Like our building that I'm sitting in here, you know, our families say that their DNA is in these walls, and it is because they built it with their own hands, you know. And so many times I hear the families and even the students say that we're like a second family to them. And you know, one of the properties of community is that it's alive. And I really feel that life here at Uncommon Good. You know, I'm struck by how often I hear laughter in the building. You know, all day long I'm hearing people laughing, even in hard times like now. You know, there's laughter because there's life, because there's community, you know. You know, it's been a challenge, of course, to try to switch to technology during COVID. You know, Carlos, one of our colleagues, was saying, you know, our parents don't even know what a computer mouse is, you know, so it's been difficult, but we're adapting as best we can. And, but we're also looking forward to getting back to where we can do that beautiful face-to-face interaction again with each other. So Carolina, do you have something to add as well?
Yeah, I think that as much as we've been able to adapt and transition a lot of our programming to virtual meetings, I think we see more and more, especially our young people in our program, really sustain the meetings throughout time and space, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. And it just goes to show how essential human connection is. And I think as we are, you know, continuing on, they have maintained their connection on and on. And I think this might just be a new way to adapt to a new normal that we may not know when it would be safe to continue all of our one-on-one work that we do so closely often. I will also say this, that often, you know, this transition has really illuminated the fact that for a lot of our families, access to technology, access to knowledge about how to navigate these different mechanisms has really just shown what big of a gap there is, especially with our families, and especially during the pandemic when a lot of our parents are really struggling with having a job, right? When they have been let go, a lot of our families are still struggling with being able to pay their bills, their rent, and even being able to pay their internet bill for their students and their kids to have access to all of this human connection that we now have to do virtually. And so I think it has definitely illuminated a big gap, but often, you know, the bright side of this is that students definitely feel and are able to transition through our programming really well and sustain a lot of the work that we keep doing.
Great, thank you so much. I'd love to keep this going. I wish that we could, but there's several questions in the chat, and I'm now going to turn this over to Sandra and Suvan to actually ask in the few remaining minutes, we don't have that many left, but to ask some of the some questions of our panelists.
Yeah, the main question that's popped up has been from Beverly Nidus, who's done this work herself in terms of community art and taught it. And she's asking in LA, who's teaching community-based art and social practice now? And I don't know if, you know, I know if those of you who either have had, you know, artists working with you, or Sheila, if you can add, you know, from your experience as a, you know, emeritus professor, there's many of you that it's entwined in your practice, but I don't know of as many formal programs since Suzanne Lacey shifted from Otis over to SC.
Well, I mean, Pitzer College, integral to their curriculum, students must do one semester in the community.
Oh, okay.
And so that's integral to their curriculum. And also at Pomona, many courses follow that model as well. And also Pomona has a very vigorous internship program in which students get credit for volunteering with community-based organizations. And so any of you who need some more help, call Pomona College and get some students to help you.
Yeah, and as was noted, also USC, I've been working with them these last 10 years as a way with the Annenberg School of Communication and their RAP program, which is a radical group of teachers that work alongside it. And Anne Bray is one of them that I work with, and David. I also have extensively worked with Francois and also with Taj Frazier and I. He and I have been teaming up on really doing deep dives into the community with the USC folks. And then there's another group that's called, I'm a part of the group that's called Senior Fellows of USC, which is a program that they have that's a number of people who are like any one of ourselves that are really proactive and want to do work within the community. They have a facility on helping people facilitate doing a deeper dive in that. And they are, all of these things have surprised me within USC because I did not expect all of these types of things to be possible within there. But I must say that they have really figured out to just let things happen and not really control this much. And so the growth with me and them has been pretty well. We've been able to put together these programs, and they haven't tried to own them. They're letting us let the community own the things that we've created. I made sure that that was in our contracts because they did have a perpetual ownership clause in it, but I brought that out because I'm in filmmaking and I know how to read the contracts, and I wrote those things out. So everything that we create within the community, it's open source and ready for us to pass it on in other ways to the greater community. So that's the structural dynamics that I've worked with them, but I've worked also with with Claremont a lot, and they've done, and their students, like she was saying, I've had them work with us on homeless. When there was the Dome Village downtown, we were able to work with the homeless portion of them, and I worked with John Malapede way back in the days when we were doing those works, especially with the LA Festival and that whole group of folks that did during the Olympics. They did this phenomenal piece of each person talking about their various ways of dealing with homelessness downtown. And I just remember this one man that depicted him falling 4 stories off of the wall and talking about it and telling us the story of what it felt like as he was sliding down. It was one of the most dynamic reconditionings of what a person thinks through the process of jumping out intentionally and thinking that you can stop on the way down. And live through it and tell us the story. And it was really, really powerful to me, but it also shows the desperateness of what happens with people when they're in the particular situation in homelessness downtown. Right. So I must say that the only thing that has really kept me alive is my interrelationship with the colleges and schools and the nonprofits in the communities, because I've worked with all of them, and it's been the way that I've been able to feed myself, because I'll do a little I'll do it for a little next to nothing, but all of that little next to nothing added up to an operating nut to be able to pay my place and keep things going. And I am not a nonprofit, but I work for nonprofits. And that's been my whole focus when we started, is to figure out how we could work with nonprofits and really make their ideas work. So that's part of the reason I team up with big universities, because they have big budgets, and then we were able to get $1.5 million and multiple millions to get tools for the smaller organizations around the city. And so that was the way that I tried to do everything. I didn't just buy it for me when I bought equipment, I bought it for 9 other sites to help them all move together with us, as opposed to just say, I want all the tools myself. You know, I thought it was better to figure out how to write things that you could share, so you could have a team of people that grow together and we can make a network happen. So there we go, that's it.
It's a very distributed system, I think, you know, as Sheila remarked. I believe Oxy Arts is doing something that way. Kim Ableys, who's on the call, you know, it's done community art. In fact, she's featured in the LA Times today. You know, for her smog work, but, you know, forever. And I did a project with her a few years ago, and, you know, when she gets a grant and a relationship with a nonprofit, she, in a sense, continues the education, because there's always a fund there for her to then hire either current students or recent graduates, so they can add to their own resume of doing these kind of projects. So it seems it makes, and I know she recently did a year or so ago, you know, she was a guest professor at Cal State LA. I'm not sure if it's wrapping up as much as a degree program any longer as it is. It's maybe more infiltrated and you know, integral to a lot of majors, whether they're art or another field, is community involvement. But you're closer to it than I. I don't see other questions in the chat right now, Sheila. So if you want to do some type of summary of the conversation, that would be great. And then we can just tell everyone thank you and give them, I'll put in, Suvan, can you maybe put in the, for those that don't have it, the URL where they can visit the exhibition?
Yes. So I view this as not the end of our session, but the beginning. And I'm hoping that we can all stay in touch, and that we can all grow our community with the people who are on this panel. And I am so appreciative for you all to be with us tonight. Every single one of you added such an important dimension to the conversation. And so I thank you, and thank you, and I wish you all well with your work, and to have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sheila.
All right, thank you, Sheila.
guys. Good night,
Thanks.
everyone.
It was fun being on there with y'all.
Sheila, thank
Y'all
you
are
so
amazing.
much. The
Thank
Women's Caucus is so proud over the years to have had our affiliation with you. You're just terrific artist, terrific person.
This was absolutely delightful. Thank you all. I learned so much, and wonderful to see that this much is going on in the community. I assume that you all know each other, but if you didn't, I hope that you've been as impressed with one another as the rest of us have. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much.